Naked Trump statue equals misogyny. To feminists, of course, because reasons. Okay, the immediate reactions I saw to the Trump statues from my overwhelmingly leftist extended social network was the typical moronic, blithering, smug amusement that you would expect from people who are willing to hate a politician unconditionally, mostly for cultural reasons, without even thinking about what it is exactly they hate about him in any particular depth. They just assume that they hate this guy because he's a rich white guy running for office, so patriarchy or something, and because they heard he said some mean things. However, I was almost slightly surprised by the backlash against this particular action that also came from people who are anti-Trump. While I imagine a lot of conservative people assume otherwise, there were many liberals, progressives, or SJWs who felt that these statues were in poor taste, and they expressed these sentiments publicly, which I guess is kind of a good thing. Unfortunately, they generally missed the point. There were, in fact, a few people that acknowledged the hypocrisy of body shaming a man compared to a woman, not necessarily hardcore feminists, just general rational leftists. Though I would point out that it isn't just body shaming Clinton that people say is sexist, if that even happens, which I don't remember. Rather, people think that just making fun of her voice is sexist, or saying that she yells. Anyhow, while I did see some people objecting to these statues, I never saw any of the deep soul searching from actual feminists that I was hoping for. It's a shame because leftists had a super easy big publicity stunt that captured the attention of practically the entire world within just a day or so. But instead of using it as an opportunity to reflect honestly about the double standards with leftist SJW types, they tried to attempt to do what they always do, which was somehow make it into a feminist issue, because fourth wave intersectional feminists dominate basically the entirety of supposedly progressive discourse right now. So even when a major example of something that they could easily call male bashing or misandry happens, they can't just admit that. They are forced to say the exact opposite of what is true, which is that it was somehow still a feminist issue, because as the feminist pathology goes, narrative over fact. I never once saw a feminist on social media mention the idea of sexism against men for making the statue without balls and with a tiny penis. It seemed like instead of admitting that this was a problem and that men can obviously experience sexist body shaming too, or whatever, they were more just focused on trying to virtue signal that they were opposed to it, and therefore not a part of the problem. But they couldn't just call the problem what it was, which was socially acceptable misandry. Never, in the feminist mind, could they bring themselves to say such an obvious truth, even when it was staring them in the face in something like 5 American cities. I repeatedly saw posts that mention words like cis, sexist, transphobic, body shaving, and even misogynist in reference to this. Yes, somebody makes a naked statue of a man mocking his supposedly tiny genitals, and somehow that gets to be misogynist to feminists, because fourth wave feminists can and do believe they own all oppression. If they can make this about themselves and their ideology, what can't they make about their ideology? Take this Facebook post, for example. She says, I have a lot of thoughts about the Trump statue, mostly about shame, spectacle, misogyny, and transphobia. But what I want to say is when bodies are shamed purely on aesthetic lines, be it fat shaming, size shaming, etc., it is done as the front line of patriarchy. These statements don't even have broken systems of rationalizations behind them, not religious, not political, etc. They say, your body is wrong. Patriarchy needs us to enforce its front line of body control. Don't sign up for that mess. So I'm not even going to attempt the mental gymnastics required to take this apart piece by piece, because I'm not a masochist, nor a sadist that wants to torture my audience by having me actually attempt to be logical in the face of such nonsense. But the sad part is that this woman had a number of likes and bat-patting comments from her friends. I don't think she actually opened up any sort of conversation, but she had a number of people agreeing with her. Next, I look at the article from feministing.com, which is a site that sometimes publishes semi-decent things as far as feminist sites go. I tried to keep an open mind, But of course, they didn't mention the elephant in the room either, the fact that when this happens to a man, leftists, aka feminists, don't really care, and that it is a specific double standard. They did say this, though, which was kind of a redeeming paragraph. The left-leaning middle class can have a hearty laugh while patting themselves on the back for their non-Trump supporting politics and leaving unquestioned the contradictions in their own politics that have allowed a violent, capitalist, patriarchal, transphobic world to exist. Nothing is being said by this piece that is difficult for one in the current political climate to say. That Trump is a joke, or that fat people must be shamed, or that male bodies that don't conform to masculine notions of genitalia deserve scorn. Indeed, the real naked emperors seem to be the installation's smug audience instead, parading around in seeming robes of progressive politics, which actually, upon closer inspection, are their own naked delusions of open-minded, non-oppressive grandeur. I have to say, I actually largely legitimately agree with that paragraph, minus where they mention patriarchal world, because we don't live in a patriarchy in the West, but I get into that in other videos. Still, it seems like they took deliberate effort to once again frame it to avoid the notion of double standards of misogyny versus misandry, and how if this type of thing were done to Clinton, it would have potentially caused a violent feminist riot, or at least a bunch of women smearing red paint on themselves as if it were period blood or whatever they do to be ridiculous when they're mad. I don't expect feminists to fully admit that they are wrong quickly about things like these. Many of them are getting paid to be feminists, which is as good as being paid to be wrong. In most instances. But it sure would be nice if they didn't say the exact opposite of the truth when confronted with something that could give them an opportunity to prove some legitimate virtue, that they can see any sort of fairness in the world. Sexism is a two-way street. They could have easily just acknowledged that, but they chose not to. Shame on them. Let me know what you think in the comments.